Greetings. Happy Wednesday to you and welcome to Salem News Channel. I'm Stacy, Washington. The Republican-led House voted Tuesday to pass a 6-month funding bill that would prevent a government shutdown at the end of the week, overcoming fierce Democratic objections. The vote was 217 to 213, with all Republicans but Thomas Massie of Kentucky supporting the legislation. Just one lone Democrat, Jared Golden of Maine, voted for it.
Now that the government funding bill has been passed out of the House, we send it to the Senate, and it falls on the desk of Chuck Schumer. He is the leader of the Democrats on that side, and he must determine whether he wants to fund the government, do the responsible thing, or whether he wants to shut the government down. And I certainly hope that there are enough Democrats in the Senate who have a conscience, who will do the right thing by the American people and take care of business over there.
8 Democratic senators would have to support the bill to cross the Senate's 60-vote threshold and send it to President Trump's desk. Joining me now to discuss is Brandon Arnold, Executive Vice President at the National Taxpayers Union. Brandon, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Stacy.
All right, so let's just touch on this. What is the chance that 8 Democrats will cross over and support this thing?
Well, it's tough to predict exactly what Democrats are going to do, but my sense is they're going to do the right thing here, support this bill, keep the government open. More importantly, they'll be grinding their teeth because this bill is actually pretty solid. It does start to trim away at the federal budget. It starts to reduce spending instead of increasing spending, which we've done year after year after year. So we do start to get at that reading. But listen, Democrats don't want to see a government shutdown. So they're willing to tolerate, I think, some of these spending reductions just to keep the lights on at all their beloved departments and agencies here in Washington.
Yeah, and that's the big secret, isn't it? If the shutdown occurs and it lasts past, I think it's April 30th, then you get a 1% across the board cut. And that would enable Elon Musk to send another email saying, hey, are you close to retirement? Here's $25,000. Go ahead and retire today. And he would be able to shave off more, which they don't want anyone to be fired. They don't want any cuts to government, no contracts canceled. They don't even want the excess Zoom and Politico seats that have been paid for that there aren't even employees for. They don't even want those cuts. So I think maybe we'll see the 8 crossover. I mean, they have to be strategizing. Chuck Schumer hasn't even announced whether or not he's going to do anything.
Yeah, they say in Washington, the most dangerous place to be is between Chuck Schumer and a television camera. The guy just loves to be on TV at every opportunity. And the fact that he has been plastered on CNN and every MSNBC and every single television program out there saying how bad this CR is, how bad this spending bill is, suggests to me that they think it's actually tolerable and that he knows he's going to lose those 8 or maybe even more Democratic senators to keep the government funded. The House really turned the screws on the Democrats because almost immediately after they passed the bill, they decided to just drop the gavel and get out of Dodge. They left town. So if the Senate does not approve this bill this week, then we would almost certainly be facing a government shutdown because the House isn't scheduled to get back for a week and a half at this point.
Okay, so now, Brandon, you started this. Let's get in there. You have they're using every procedural move available to them to bring about the result that they want. But we know President Trump and his team have already strategized how to basically pin this entirely on the Democrats if it doesn't pass, which in the past, Obama did this very well. He would shut down the national parks. And Americans would blame that on the Republicans who shut down government because they weren't able to get any cuts or any good things at all. I've seen some demonizing going on at the town halls. I watched some video this morning of an elected official in Maryland. He's a Democrat saying that this bill cuts Medicaid and we need to do a better job of telling the American people just how horrible the Republicans' ideas are. That's not true. This bill does not touch Medicaid. But it does fund a lot of deportation priorities, lots and lots, billions of dollars in funding to refill those coffers. So if they have to vote for it, the messaging could be that the Democrats helped with the immigration problem.
Yeah, I suppose so. it puts them in a really uncomfortable place, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Most of what this bill does, it's a very bare bones bill. It's mostly a continuing resolution, not one of the funding bills that we actually want to see, where Congress actually does their job, rolls up their sleeves, gets into the nitty gritty of the federal budget, and say we're going to give this amount of money to this department, this amount of money to that agency, and so forth, and tells them how to run their operations. What this bill is, as a continuing resolution, is basically just extending last year's funding, 2024 levels of funding, into this year. And given that inflation has been what it continues to be, that's actually a little bit of a cut. It actually drives down spending a little bit, but it doesn't provide a lot of detail as to how agencies and departments are to carry out their everyday functions there. So Democrats are certainly going to make the case that this makes cuts to popular programs like Medicaid, but it's not true. It's just an extension of last year's funding. By the way, their guy, Biden, was in office last year, so it's kind of extending the funding there, but I think it does so, again, at slightly lower rates, and begins to trim away at wasteful spending like earmarks. So it's certainly worthy of support from conservatives.
Yeah, I mean, I heard it was a clean CR, so I started reading up on it, and I thought, okay, it actually does fund priorities that President Trump ran on, deportation. It also sends money back to DHS, and it trims a little bit. But the real work comes after. You just alluded to it. We were told when Leader McCarthy took the reins of the House during the Biden administration that there would be, clean bills presented, a single subject bill to run this agency and the next, as you've described, which is its regular budgetary order. Now we have a chance with the control of the House and the Senate in the hands of the GOP. They could actually bring forward these individual appropriation bills, and that gives them this whole spring and summer to formulate those before the end of the fiscal year. But do you think they're going to do it, Brandon? I mean, it's been a desert.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's been a long, long time since Congress actually passed all 12 of the appropriations bills. Again, because it's broken up across 12 bills, that in theory ought to give Congress the ability to go in to root out those wasteful programs, to root out all the fraud and abuse within the system. But they haven't. They've always skirted that responsibility. And then at the 11th hour, passed a bloated continuing resolution bill. This is not a bloated continuing resolution bill. It's unfortunate that we're doing this as a continuing resolution bill, a single legislative vehicle, rather than chopping it up. But you're right. Immediately after this thing is signed by President Trump, Congress ought to get back to regular order, and they need to start moving those bills on an individual basis. I'm hopeful. I've seen this movie a few too many times. I am hopeful that under the leadership of Speaker Johnson, Donald Trump, and Senate Majority Leader John Thune, that we'll actually see a change in the way Washington is run and start doing the people's business the way it ought to be done.
I agree. And I do have some hope, although I was one of the people tweeting and railing against McCarthy when he was saying he shouldn't have been removed, when he made all those promises about these single subject bills, because we have to get Americans used to this idea, right? The work that you do at National Taxpayers Union is to get Americans and legislators used to the way things used to work, which was there was a lot of fighting. But at the end of the day, we couldn't say, well, this bureaucracy is doing X, Y, and Z against the will of the American people, because they would have instructions. This is how this is appropriated. This line item goes to that. And so it was harder to have the fraud, waste, and abuse that DOGE is currently highlighting. So it really is important. I know Democrats think the Republicans are lying. I'm not sure why, if they never made an effort to do this work, they feel they have credibility to call anyone a liar. But the fact is, Americans won't be used to this until it's actually done. So we have to do it this year.
Oh, I totally agree. And listen, we operate under this misguided philosophy in Washington that if we want to cut budgets, that the onus is on us to prove that these projects are wasteful or doing things that aren't necessary for the government to do. But really, the onus should be on the other side. If you want taxpayers to spend millions or billions or more on a government program, you need to justify that this is doing something positive for the American people and is worth the American taxpayers' resources. The burden should be on you, not on us to cut it. If you want to make an argument for whatever department, whatever agency, whatever program, go ahead before Congress, have a hearing, make that case to the American public, make that case to the legislature that we need these programs. Don't force us to justify those cuts. And unfortunately, that mentality has been turned upside down for far too long. Hopefully it's beginning to change. I think DOGE is doing a really good job of shaking things up here in Washington, and there's a lot more shaking up that needs to take place.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I go to the DOGE website every day. I go on there and I spend about 7 minutes. I just scroll through and see what's new. All the links go back to Twitter, so you can go there and see what they have. I recommend this to everyone to go take a look at the work they're doing. Whether you believe it or not is kind of your own personal thing, but go read what they are finding. And then it gives you a better idea of why we've been screaming for reform in this area and why your work is so important over at National Taxpayers Union. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on. It's good to see you tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. And we'll talk to you again soon.